Welcome to the only English language review of Beneath the Mat in which you will hear the name of the submarines pronounced right. Beneath the Mat is the fourth game in the Hunter system, which is a system that represents different fleets of submarines as they go around the seas destroying stuff. And this time we have the Regia Marina, which is the Italian submarine fleet in World War II. Who knew that there even was such a thing, right? And yet the Italians were there hunting, sending their slow torpedoes, the man-slow torpedoes, delivering stuff to Singapore, also the crazy stuff that you may or may not know about. So as usual, a war game is a way of learning about history, and this is no exception. This is a solitaire game in which you will play the role of a commander starting from 1940, a submarine commander. You will choose a type of submarine. You will try to stay with that one for as long as possible. You may upgrade it, you may get a new one, a lot of things may happen, you may die, your crew may level up, etc, etc, etc. At the heart, this is a procedural game, meaning that it relies on a lot of die rolls that will be then matched with the entries of event tables to see what happens, where you're sent, who your enemies are, etc, etc, etc. You will roll dice to determine if you attack and if you're successful, and if the enemies attack you and they're successful, more die rolls to determine what kind of damage you will receive. And you go from there. The game is divided by missions. At the end of each mission there will be a time in which you refit, and the more damage you took, the longer it will take for you to refit, which means in a tour of duty, in a specific span of time representing a game, you may have a variable number of missions depending on how much refit you have to deal with between each mission. So at its heart is a game where you are taking notes, rolling dice, and moving counters on player aids, and then simply flipping through player aids, looking for the next table, the next thing, the next entry, the next encounter table or combat table, or so on and so forth. It may seem very dry and abstract, but if you ever played a classic game, B-17, or one of the different games that came out of that illustrious progenitor, including the Hunters, which is this is how things go to full circle. If you play the game, you will see the similarities here. To me, the Hunter system has many similarities with B-17, Queen of the Skies, and I said that in the most positive terms because I love B-17. It's a beloved classic, and it has that strong narrative element that pretty much just seems really to create the chronicle of a crew of people struggling against impossible odds. And the Hunters, again, to me is almost B-17 of the seas, which I do not say, I must stress that, in a derogatory term. I don't think this is derivative. I think the core idea of a procedural system that we had in B-17 has been translated very well to a different war theater, sea instead of air, etc, etc, and the result is pretty much its own beast. It has its own personality. So if you love B-17, you probably will love the Hunter system, and you will not feel that you're playing just a copy of the old system. So the first thing that you need to do when you play Beneath the Mat is to choose your submarine. So maybe you will choose the Acciaio class, or the Adua, or the Cagni, the Calvi, the Foca. Told you I was gonna pronounce them. The Liuzzi, the Marconi, etc, etc. So you have a reference for when you're playing the game and you're trying to say these things right. Each submarine comes with its own player aid, and you will place tokens indicating how many torpedoes are loaded, how many you have as reloads. You will have here markers as the game goes that go on this track here if you take hull damage or if you take flooding. Damage spaces, again, you will place tokens here in case you take damage to these systems. And what you have here at the bottom is basically the board. during the game, you will be assigned to different locations. Say, suppose that the Kanyi is being assigned to the central med, then I will take a token representing my Kanyi. I'll put it here in the leftmost space of the central med space. I will resolve an event in that box in the transit table, then another event here, and simply you move from space to space, each representing a step in your journey. And this is what you also have in the other games in the Hunters system. A difference here is that you actually also have maps that are not necessary. Actually, I still like to play the game on the player aids on this somewhat abstract but really nice system here. Everything is tight, but if you like to have more of a sense of space and location, you do have these maps that you can use instead. So that's the general idea. You set up your submarine with your tokens representing different things. You roll to see where you go. You may be stationed in the Mediterranean. You may be stationed in Atlantic. Who knew that Italians went that far? Then you will roll to determine the kind of assignment that you receive. Is it just a normal hunting mission in which you go out, try to sink as much enemy tonnage as possible, or you're gonna do other things? You're gonna lay mines, you're gonna send those slow man torpedoes, and so on and so forth. And so you will be, by rolling on the assignment table, you will know where you go, and you will use different tables depending on the period of the war that we're talking about. You start from 1940, June 1940, and you go until late 1943, if you go that far. So for example, I'm rolling here and I'm in the Eastern Mediterranean, then I know where I'm gonna put my marker here on my player aid. After we have the assignment, it's time to go. For each of those boxes, so you will roll on the encounter chart. As you can see, the encounter chart has several columns that will and you will use the one that describes your location. So for example, when you roll we're in transit, you roll on this one. When you're in the Western Mediterranean, you roll on this one, and so on and so forth. Roll 2 dice, add the results, and maybe nothing will happen, which really feels thematic. You're just there, nothing's happening, nothing's happening, nothing happening. Submarine games very often have this odd pace that probably will be unbearable and considered a big flaw in most other games, in which nothing happens for a long time, then everything happens and the game is over. And that fits the theme, so we're okay with that. So maybe nothing happens, maybe I'm attacked by an aircraft, in which case I resolve that. Hopefully I make contact with enemies. With enemy's convoy, you're a lonely, silly freighter, in which case you roll, hey, you guessed it, that's the general idea. You roll on tables to determine what kind of ships you encounter. If you encounter a capital ship, a warship, again, freighters, tankers, and suppose I encounter 2 tankers and a freighter. Then, when I do have an encounter, we move on to the attack mat. We're going to place here tokens representing the enemy ships. So, for example, I have a tanker, and the tonnage is 10,000, and then I'm gonna put a marker there. If the tonnage is a little less, I put it there. So basically, where I put the marker in a column indicates how many quote-unquote life points the ship has. Each time I inflict a hit, it goes up by 1 or down. It depends on which way. Either way, it's a way of keeping track of your ships. You will place markers here recording other things, for example, if it's day or night, if you are surfaced or submerged, and if the convoy has an escort. At the point you start the combat procedure, you will select the range at which you're attacking. The closer you go, the better the chances that you're gonna hit, but if you go really close, there's a chance that actually the escort will spot you before you get to fire. So what happens next depends on that choice, the crucial choice of the range, and then you decide. Actually, also you can choose day or night, because when you encounter the enemy is randomly determined, but then you can try to pursue it, in which case you roll a die to see if you're able to stay together with the convoy from day to night or night to day. Otherwise, the encounter, if you fail that roll, the encounter is over. So there are decisions as you set up the situation, the time, the range, how many torpedoes you fire. When that is the case, then you roll, and simply you will apply modifiers, roll on the combat table, and you will know for each torpedo if it's a miss or a hit. For each torpedo that hits, you gotta roll one more time to see if it's a dot. Chances are not many, but dots do happen. Finally, for each torpedo that hit and was not a dot, then you roll on the damage chart, and you see if you're able to sink the enemy ship. Then, well, the escort is going to try to detect you. There is a die roll for that, surprisingly. And you take it from there. If they do detect you, they will attack you. If they attack you, they may hit you. If they hit you, you need to determine the damage, how much damage. For each damage, you roll on a table to see where the damage is received. And from there, you can try to break away. You can try to actually pursue the convoy more, etc., etc., etc. An option that is different in this game from other games in the Hunter system is that you can choose to attack the convoy. If you score hits against the convoy, then of course you have an advantage when the convoy tries to attack you. But the rulebook warns you that that can be dangerous in itself because you're wasting potentially torpedoes. And actually, that's my view. It's an option that I have in the game. If you want to try that one, you can. I personally never attack the convoy because torpedoes are such a precious resource there under and in the middle of the Mediterranean. I prefer to save them to attack the convoy itself. A lot of other things may happen precisely because this is a game that is rich with theme. It covers so many possible situations. And like in the original B-17, like in other games in the system, it is all about what may happen. It is all about the narrative. It is all about the micro alternative history that you are weaving here. I like it. I like it like I like the other games in the system. Again, it's interesting to see a perspective on naval and submarine warfare that is little known. I'm Italian, and even I didn't know a lot or almost anything of what is in here. That aspect of warfare, World War II, I guess, is overlooked. And again, I definitely welcome the opportunity of learning more about it. If you watched other videos by me in of games in this system, you can just watch those conclusions. I guess that's pretty much applies here, which is I like it, I like it, I like it, I like the system. It's fun, it's unusual. Well, by this point we have several in the Hunter system, but other than that, it has this old school feel, old school flavor of B-17 in the sea. It feels procedural, it feels cumbersome if you just hear me talk about it, but if you play it, actually it is incredibly compelling. Now in the 21st century, you probably could do a lot of what you have here totally streamlined. You press a button and the screen shows you the result, totally as a video game, totally digital. But I do believe that you lose something, that you will lose something. Probably what would be a simplistic video game, actually having it here, is a compelling old school analog war game. And it's not gonna be for everybody. I can't imagine somebody who is 20 years old in 2020 playing this game and really enjoying it. I hope there are people out there, but I don't think that's the target, because just flipping through all of these charts and where did I put that one and rolling 5 times to see what happens in that case, just not very appealing, I believe, to a lot of younger people these days. But for old cranky people like you and I, old school war gamers, there is joy to be had. The complexity, some of the cumbersome elements somehow delays the result, creates suspense. Oh my gosh, I rolled really poorly and something terribly happened, and I still have 4 damage rolls to resolve, which is a lot more compelling and exciting, and it creates a sense of dread than if the screen flashes the result at you and that is done. There is joy to me in the tactile element, in shuffling these things around, in rolling those dice, in making marks and notes with pencil, creating my log, creating my narrative, etc., etc., etc. Ultimately, it is a strong narrative experience with this old school feel to it. When it comes to decisions, decisions are the heart of any game, truly. Some games have such a strong narrative that even if the game is decision light, we're still excited by it. The Hunters to me is remarkable as a system in that it combines the strong narrative feel that you have from all of the events that may emerge from these tables, but at the same time, still a lot of decisions because they may not look like many decisions, the ones that you have, but they are relevant. And it look like just, oh, let's see if I attack in the distance. But then different things may happen. You can choose to press the attack again. How at night you have several options that you don't have during the day. There are just so many things that may not look like much by themselves, but they do add up and they do give you a satisfying, rewarding sense of agency. All these things can apply to the Hunters, to any game in the Hunter system, and they apply here. So beneath the mat, maybe the only quote-unquote negative thing I can say is that, again, you get to learn about these submarines, you get to learn about these things, but the overall flow really is not very different. So if you have the games in the system, of course I'm going to say maybe you don't need this one, but I'm going to say, well, of course you're going to get this one because what's going to be like you're going to have your collection with a missing title? Come on, what kind of gamer are you? So if you had the previous games in the system and you weren't a gamer, you wouldn't need this one. But since you're a gamer, you probably want to have this one because it has all the qualities of the previous games in the Hunter system, now with a theme that is not particularly well known, and so it gives us more opportunities to appreciate it in the form of a game. Beneath the Mat, a nice welcome addition to a very solid system, something that was solid already, and now it has one more title in it and one more title that definitely is fun and enjoyable to play.